Okay, welcome to our workshop organized by TYMIQ. And today we will talk about architecture, architectures, and architectural decisions. So plan is very simple. I make very short formal stuff, definition, my vision of the architecture role and architectures of the systems. And after that, I prepared, I think it's 8 cases. Unfortunately, it's almost all the bad cases, so disasters that happens in the my projects and projects from the TYMIQ and InnoQ. I present the context a little bit. What is the business domain? How much is the team? What happens? So why the architecture cause such kind of challenge and problems and disaster? After that, we will say for what kind of solutions we proposed and how go out of the situation. And after each such slot, we have time for discussions. So I really remind that this workshop is not kind of my presentation only. Yeah, so really appreciate after each case your ideas, your vision, your questions. So please participate actively in our workshop. Okay, let's go ahead. Totally about me. I'm working as a software engineer in the VMWare Tanzu Labs. And our daily job, we normally have quite a short engagement with the customer and helping customer to modernize the systems or build it from scratch using the modern technology and methodology like test-driven development, pair programming, event storming. Because of that, I have quite a lot of material for that kind of presentation. I am also a committer or participating in the open source project, mostly in the Spring and Apache, and sometimes I'm speaking the technical conferences. Architecture, what is the architecture from my point of view? So today, our time and architecture, and especially enterprise architecture, has bit negative connotations. So it's some person who makes some strange things, just drawing the diagrams, pin it on the wall. Nobody understands what he do, and he don't understand what the team does. This is really, let's say, anti-pattern. That kind of architecture, in most of cases, doesn't work. So from my point of view, today, almost all team members participate in architecture solutions. So they should make some decisions. Really go here or there. And these decisions are necessary. And basically, these decisions are part of our architecture. So very formal definition architecture in ISO standard is kind of fundamental concept of the elements of the system and relation between them. And of course, evolution of the system. It makes a lot of sense. I even more like the definition of Grady Butch, whose architecture said that the architecture is all the things what is hardly to change afterwards. So it's possible to change, yeah, so we can adapt the architecture, but it's very expensive. It's expensive as changing the other stuff. And also very nice definition of architecture is anything what the team considers to be important enough to be architecture. For example, perhaps using one or another version of frameworks is not architectural decisions or code style from our team, but the unit coverage. But for example, how to split our system in the deployable unit, or what kind of communication is synchronous or asynchronous between the two systems, or a kind of how to organize the teams itself is very essential, and team considers it as architecture. So 2 points, what from my point of view architecture is not. It's not kind of upfront activity what we do in the beginning of the project, and then they finish and we start the implementation. So this is, in most of cases, it doesn't work because doing architecture without knowledge of the context, without fighting with the challenges, without adopting and changes the requirements is not a good idea. Normally, architecture lives together with the system and evolves together with the system. And also, architecture is not document. It's not some kind of diagram, not a picture. It's basically the property of your system. It is your system. It's part of your system. And your system will have an architecture, definitely, either intentional or accidentally, but it will have one. And even if they completely ignore the architecture decisions, we end up with some accidental architecture, perhaps with one which we don't want to have. What is a good architecture? What do you think? How the good architecture could look like? Any ideas? Yes.
I think
nobody knows what is a good architecture.
Questions.
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to answer this question because question is stupid. I can answer say what is a good car. And
So
it's a
BMW, obviously.
yeah,
No
it's of course a matter of test. So what I like, but it's also very important to say what is the purpose of the system of the car. Yeah, so some people like such kind of cars. Sometimes this kind of car is better, and sometimes we will use this kind of car. It's basically very similar. We can define we can look into the architecture as formal aspects of the system quality. And for some cases, in some contexts, one aspect could be very important and other aspect less important. For example, I can imagine that in some cases, maintainability is not, usability is highly important, but we can almost ignore security. So it's not very essential. Or system could be scalable, but shouldn't be usable because we have only machine-to-machine communication. So usability is not so important. If we try to, it's very obvious, but the people in the project still missing this aspect. Therefore, if we just try to depict a bit known systems and these coordinates, x, so horizontal x is how complex it's, so written over the weekend, or such complex as a German tax law. And on the vertical line, the vertical x is how many users use the system. You put, for example, here is simple GUI, admin GUI, so we can write it quickly and it has only few users. The tweeter, from my point of view, has not so much complexity, but is scalable, very scalable. Netflix and Facebook are a bit more complex, and Amazon even more complex. Google search has a lot of complexity and, of course, is very scalable. If we develop some kind of insurance policy management system, it has very complicated business logic, but is not scalable. Perhaps has only some hundred of users. Okay, ChatGPT has also a lot of complexity and currently is have a middle scalability. And dependent on this, we choose the architecture. So the architecture that fit good for Twitter and Netflix, not necessarily be good choice for insurance management system and vice versa. So the architecture really depends on the content, depends on our requirements. Okay, let's go. So about this general part, do you have any questions now? Or any what you disagree? Anything?
No, for the moment.
Okay, let's go ahead, and I will start with my 8 cases. Yeah, so structure I already said. We have a kind of context. What is the business domain? What is a team? Sometimes the technology a little bit. Then observation of the situation. What happens? And the next part will be our solution, how to go out of the situation and which lesson was, or which lesson was learned. And we have a time slot for discussion. So you can ask the question, make your own examples, or debate if you disagree with them. So the first case, I think some of you will recognize this project and this architecture. I name it painful sharing. The context, the business domain is e-commerce shop, and what quite a long-running project. The customer first use a framework to create electronic shop, e-commerce shops. After that, because of some reason, they just rewritten on their own implementation, Java-based implementation. Development team was in the beginning about 30% and then grows. The architecture after this shop created with the tool was rewritten to Java looked like this one. So on the top line, you see some services. It's not real, they're not real microservices because they still all the stuff will deploy it on the same container. But they kind of independent and have every service has a REST API. Interesting is the second line, the second level is domains. So domains is functionality that's shared between the different services. So if the service shares something, you decide why you should implement it in two services, let's put it in the domain and just make a service dependent on that. On the next level, is a core domain is a bit monster because all common functionalities that you're not sure where to put it will go to the core domain. Next layer is a kind of connectors to the databases, SAP system and message. This is the architecture that was created in the project, and I would say the on the first months, the architecture was not bad. They allowed us to create quite a fast solution, working solution, and it was okay. I also would say that protect a bit the people who make this kind of decisions that normally the people, the colleagues make architecture with the best intentions. So normally nobody want to do the bad things. Just make a decision or architecture things that make the best choice. But sometimes because of context changed, or sometimes because our assumptions was false, was incorrect, we end up with a mess and disaster. So the similar what happens on this project. With the time, we see that dependency between the services and domains looks like a lot of dependencies, and I observe that modification and maintenance, especially the common domains that share it across the teams, are very difficult. Becomes very difficult. After deployments, one team could break the work with other team because it's the components deployed in the same container. There's a migration to the new version. So any new version, Java, Hibernate, itself was extremely difficult and takes a huge time. What is the solution? What was the solution? The first step, there's several steps on that. The first step was to provide independent code bases for the team. Yeah. So how we achieve it? And the first step is very simple and stupid. Just copy the domains. So if the customer domain was shared between card service and user service, just copy it one-to-one. So duplicate it. Make a redundancy. Yeah. So the card service use a customer domain and user service use a customer domain without any modification first time. Of course, there is a clear violation of the don't repeat yourself principle. But the gain of that was so huge that even if you should fix some bugs in the several places, the gain that the team has own code bases, they can control it, have so much effect that the teams immediately started to refactor the stuff, to remove unnecessary things, they try new solutions, new technologies. The really motivation of the team has a huge impact on the motivation of it. With core frameworks, the core domain was the complicated part. All the business related functionality for core domain was also extracted and put it in the core databases of the team. And core domain stays, but contains only common technical code. And it has own lifecycle and interpreted as third-party lib. So we have just dependency on that, but it's third-party library, kind of third-party library for us. And if some changes come in, we just have a new release. And if the team want, they depend on the new release. If not, the old one. This was the first step. On the second step, we just see that because of scalability, mostly because of scalability requirements, it's very inconvenient to deploy all the services in the same container because you only have a choice to scale all of this. For example, price availability service has really a lot of requests in comparison with card user service. And it makes a lot of sense to scale it independently. So to have, for example, 10 instances of price availability microservice, but only 3 instances of a card service. Therefore, we started to extract it as an independent deployable unit. But the services still use a common database. So it was the last step to decentralize data management. There's several approaches how to do it because of one service still needs information from others. You can just call the API and get it from the rest. Or another approach was kind of asynchronous decentralization, when the card service publish changes into the queue, and all services with interest in these changes subscribe from this queue and apply in their own database. It of course provide only eventual consistency, so the databases will be not immediately consistent, but will be consistent after some time. This basically what is it's still in works as a decentralization of data management, but is the right way to go in this project. What was the lesson learned here? First, I find especially dangerous to chain model across the team. So chain inside the team is not so bad, but chain across the team daily double think and double check. And sometimes even duplication. So duplication of the code is less critical, less disaster as a common dependencies. Also, the common utils could be shared, but they should be interpreted as third-party libraries with own lifecycle and should be as thin as possible. Very important is team independency. The team owns its code and make a decision how to deal with the code independent from other teams. This was our outcome for it. Any question, any concern regarding this case?
How I have a question regarding the fact like every team has its own cycle, responsibility, and other team can decide if use the old version or use new one. How do you control it? How did you make versioning or?
This old version is only related to this third-party common code, so common technical code. So you have some common technical solution that could be shared between the teams, and this versioning is related only to this library. Regarding the dependencies between the teams, yes, of course, you call sometimes the API of other teams. But this is API, and the team knows that it's a public API, and incompatible changes will be dangerous. So normally you do only compatible changes. There's not breaks the works of others. So it's like a public API evolving.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question about dividing domains.
Yep.
As I understood, that means that each team will have own domain. That's clear. But what if before they used the same entities, for example? Yes, as I understood, we just duplicate entities for each domain name, right?
On the first step, yes, the entities was just duplicated. They just rarely take the project and copy it with another ID and another package name, and team use basically the same code in the first step. But after some time, after the refactoring, of course, part of what not needed is removed. And entities are, there is a case that's really entity or almost the same entity needed for different bounded context or different subdomains. But we work with kind of projection. For example, the order is a good example. Yes. So order has one meaning in checkout context and completely another meaning in the billing. So you're interested in still the order, but you're interested in other attributes. And it's absolutely okay to have the order in one business as a business subdomain and projection of the order in other business subdomain.
Okay. Thank you.
But
Can you please give an example? Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Can you please give an example of what actually belonged to the common domain?
It was kind of tracing solution, it's XF based, have some logging stuff, MDC, such kind of things. So
mostly
nothing to do
technical
with
utilities.
business. Yes, it's only technical. So it's very important for us to don't have any business logic in the common framework.
Thank you.
Okay, can you elaborate a little bit regarding order? Yeah, like you said, order in one context is one order, and in checkout, it's one thing.
I have a little, so if it's okay, I have another case where I explain it in more details. So
okay.
I have the slide for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, but from business perspective, it's the same entity. It's still order that user.
It's a kind of we use. It's kind of projection of the entity. Yeah. So it's It's kind of the same, but every the different bounded context interested in different aspect of that. And therefore, it's they have own entities.
Mm-hmm.
As to sharing the module, you say think twice, but in fact, if you are going to share the module, it seems you consider it as something common, and you should develop and support and share it from these regards. And which means it mustn't be a big problem to share it, isn't it?
It's exactly my point. Yes, it's sharing something. It's not good. So not sharing something especially between the teams. It's not a good idea from my point of view. So you should avoid that if possible. Because as soon as you have something sharing between the team, you have a lot of organizational difficulties. You should organize who should modify that, in which order, you create a release plan, because it's not to disturb each other. So really important from a point of view to have independent code basis for the team. Or
yes,
have a shared part as small as possible.
Yeah, but if it's kind of a shared module, it's a kind of common module. And of course, I mean, it's like an API used by different systems, which of course has dependency. But I mean, if you start from the point that it will be shared through the multiple teams, you are going to develop and support from these bases. And of course, it may be not so big, but of course, it's easy possible to not do it, no problem also.
Is exactly the point, because from the first point of view, because the people would like to do the best in the beginning and say why we should duplicate this. It looks similar, why we should implement it in these different services. Let's implement it once and we'll support only once. We fix bug only once. But when the team grows and this dependency really hurts. So I quite convinced that even duplication is less critical as sharing in this case.
But you, as I understood, you made a conclusion that the problem was that in sharing code itself, but now it sounds like the problem was that a lot of teams were responsible for that.
Problem is sharing. The code could be perfect.
I mean, if let's say if you have shared module but only one team responsible for that and developing the
Well,
shared.
that's okay.
What-
That's okay. Sharing
Yeah.
inside the team is okay. It's not a problem. But sharing across the team, it's
No,
fine.
but I like, let's say my team implemented responsible for the model and other teams consume, but other teams can't change it. They can only come to me and ask about some changes in this.
But why another team is dependent on your model? Then it's something wrong with team responsibility.
I mean, we all depended on, I don't know, in .NET you depended on .NET framework, so you don't duplicate .NET in every project. There is Microsoft, they implement this shared module, let's say, and we all consume. Like, what's the difference between like this?
In smaller scale, it is just easy to arrive to a situation when you're responsible for this module and you would like to change it as you want. And any small mistake in backward compatibility will just ruin another team work. You see, because it's your model, you're working with that, and you should be very careful who is consuming your model. And as soon you are independent and your model is not shared, you are really free to change this as you want. This is a point. So your idea also possible, definitely, but it's just a small increase of risk.
But if it's common model and it's used by different teams and systems, you of course know about it, and you of course must not be stupid to, I mean, change the structure. An example.
Yeah, but it's a question if it works in the large organization.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like I feel that we had we went opposite way. Absolutely, we first start copying everything, and at the end we finish that we have shared model. But
That's interesting. That's interesting.
But
Did
actually,
you find it
just,
more effective? Yeah, because my
yeah, but
experience is completely opposite.
but actually, I just realized that we do it like within the same team. That maybe that's why.
Yeah, in one
Yeah.
team it's okay. Yeah, because you have an informal relation between the people, and well-organized team could do it. But as soon as you have it between different bounded contexts and between the teams, it becomes a disaster. Okay, let's take another case. So I also see it in it's more example from TYMIQ, but I see it in a lot of other projects as well. I name it non-extensible extensibility. The context is also e-commerce, but in this case, the company produce tools to create shops, e-commerce shops. So not a shop itself, but a kind of system that could be adapted to implement any shop. I have global customer base. And the challenge in this company was that this system should be very highly customizable, because customer would like to create own shop, and they customize the fonts, text, screens, and even customize some business processes. For example, change the way how to goods sells between the countries and how they save in the storage and so on. And interestingly, they have two groups of customers. Yeah, so the first group, very large strategic customers. I think that 3 or 4 customers have cover about 50% revenue of the whole company. And they have from other side a lot of small customers. The large customer has a budget, has a lot of money, but has also a high customization requirements. So they like to change essential part of the system and apply their own business processes. Small customers has the limited budget, but they also have would like to change. So there are small things, so logos, perhaps there are some icons, content, and start with the shop. What the company implemented also was a good intention. Say, yes, we create a product that's highly customizable, that's make it satisfy both groups. And it's even so highly customizable that you need to download own IDE, Eclipse-based IDE, and create a kind of script to customize the system base of this IDE. What in the end effect was really bad solution because both group of customers was unsatisfied. The small customers are very unhappy because they should download gigabytes of EDE, learn the completely another approach, some workflows. Even the company sells a professional service to help this as small customers. But they was unsatisfied because of complexity. The large customers were also unsatisfied because they hit the limit. So in one day they see they cannot implement own business processes using this custom tool because they hit some limits in that, and create some workarounds, try to put the plugins, the custom plugins in that. The solution how to go out of the situation was just to implement more specific product lines for both of customers. So for strategic customers will receive just own system with specific requirements. And the small customer has kind of generic solution, but very limited customization. This was a solution in this case. So what's lesson learned from this case? Yeah, so unfortunately, sometimes if you attempt to satisfy everyone, you will end up to satisfy no one. And sometimes specific solution is more preferable as highly configurable one. It even the efforts, you say that the main argument to do it was that we have a single line of product and we should maintain and support only single product. Yes, but it was so complex and so hard, so hard to test, especially with this customizable EDE. That the effort to support several lines of products is even less complex, and the customers are happy with the most. Yeah, that's basically the second case. What do you think? Do you have something similar in your practice?
What it looks like in general, like normal path for growing businesses, to start with big key players, big customers, and to make perhaps serve them and satisfy all their requests just to raise enough growth for this company, product, whatever else. And it just looks like a good opportunity and a good chance to catch the right point in time where to transfer that and to make final solutions that are going to be served to all the customers. But what is your thinking about how to avoid damaging of the feelings of these first customers when they receive ideal service for a couple of years, and later on company arrives and says that we will not satisfy everything that you will ask anymore? How to deal with that?
Yeah, but it's exactly the way how to satisfy both groups. So the first one have very easy and transparent way of customizing the product, and the second group just will receive own solution what they want.
Yeah, I think Andrei meant that at certain point they will stop receiving the solution they want because you can't.
You mean how to guarantee to support for long term?
Yeah. Or to continue serving them, or to transfer them to single solution, and that means that customer helps. A relationship between a company and customer will be changed slightly. You see, and how to keep this client happy enough to continue working together.
So in this case, a big customer has also own development team normally, and even development team are satisfied that they can use basically own tool to develop. So to continue to use I don't know, IntelliJ or .NET EDE to implement to customize the base line of product for implement this requirement for the customer needs. The company who produce this solution for the shops can support them and can make kind of mixed team. So so some developers works on the customer side, or some business expert product owners and the development team from the company produced this tool just doing this. And this, they collaborate for a long time this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, let's look another case. Microservices is a solution for all problems. Disclaimer, I'm still a big fan of microservices. I think it's a really good way to make an architecture. But sometimes the microservice architecture is misused. I have two cases in this presentation in our workshop. So context was it was bookkeeping software producer, and they have kind of synchronization from online payment provider. So I have online transactions, online payments, and I would like to assign these payments to the bookkeeping transactions. This was the task. I have two deployable units. The first, the transaction service, provide REST API to outside and expose this kind of transactions. And I have scheduled jobs or cron jobs that's once per day uploads transactions from the online payment provider and store in the other format into the internal database. What was the problem in this case? What is the customer complaints about? First, there was components was implemented using legacy technology. It was a GE application. Code was very difficult to support and maintain, and it was very hard to extend the code for the new payment providers. This was basically the challenge and the pain to the customer. What the customer asked for us, please split this solution to the microservices to make code more maintainable and extensible, to help this architecture to be extensible and the code more maintainable. Our observation was, after we have some analysis, that there is only single bounding context. There is no multiple bounding context at all in this case. And both service and job belongs in the same bounding context. Also, I use single beta domain model. That's okay. So there's no reason at all to split the solution microservices, and splitting in some tiny microservices or tiny parts even make architecture and maintenance more difficult, even worse. So what was the solution? Final solution, we just re-implement, migrate service and this job using test-driven development pair programming. Modernize a bit, migrated the Spring Boot using Spring Batch for the job. Let's get some features like monitoring out of the box. And there's a huge amount of optimization in the code itself were done. As interesting, the both models are shared the same database and data model. And that's absolutely okay if these deployable units are working in the same bounded context. Yes. So the kind of mantra that every microservice should have own database is not always true. So in this case, if the microservices or deployable units belong to the same bounded context, it's absolutely okay to reuse data model and database because it's the same business context. What was the lesson learned from that? That unnecessary splitting for the models belonging to the same bounded context even cause more problems, make architecture more difficult to maintain. So the small is not always good. And microservice is not a universal solution for all problems, and not improved or doesn't improve by design automatically. So the problem here was really in design and way of implementing the service itself and the job, and not in the microservice architecture.
So this means it doesn't relate to architecture problem at all, but to code itself, isn't it?
Partly, yes. They have also over sophisticated approach to implement the job. They create a process for every user transactional. So they created about more than 1,000 processes to synchronize the payment provider transactions. This was also, there are some architectural drawbacks as well. But you're right, yeah, most of the problem was not in the architecture, most of the quality of the code and design. But they really ask us every day when we start to split the microservice, where we started with the tough stuff, when we will resolve this complexity. But they don't need this complexity at all. The solution was quite simple.
Yeah, it means one said him that microservice is the solution, but they didn't understand really if it's true or not. It probably
they would like to split it even more. So they say the service is big, therefore it's difficult to maintain. Let's split it in some pieces, and it's work better.
Yeah, it maybe was necessary just to discuss with them and say, look, it's not a problem of the service, but it's problem of the code.
Yes. They were convinced in the end, but it takes a week to do it.
I see.
But sorry, how did you convince them finally?
It was not so easy, but they just in this case pair programming helps. We just worked together for weeks, and they see that the code quality and the requirements was fulfilled just with a simple with a clean code.
Okay.
So in this case, pair programming helped us.
The task itself, like split our application to the microservices, sounds not really good. Like good goal. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, customer came to you and set a goal like split my application into microservices.
Yes, it was intention, but it was not necessary at all in this case.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next case. Yeah, I also sometimes it's really a good idea to split it, but you should have a good reasons. Normally, the criteria for splitting for me is either that they belong to the different business subdomains and will implemented by different teams. Sometimes you have different scalability requirements. Yeah, so one part should be scaled different way as another. Have different life cycle. We make a failure isolation of communications external system, or use different technology stack. So this is the reason what I normally consider as a criteria to split in microservice. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense and really helps, but not in this case.
Andrei, small reminder about timing, 45 minutes past already.
Yeah. Okay, the next case, I really like it. It's old one, but it's it's the most crazy thing what I have seen. Your system will be dynamic. Context was a large insurance system, and the use kind of is not mainstream now. Not the modern style. Use model-driven development. So the people, bit older people know what I'm speaking about. They produce 2 releases per year, so very flexible, very dynamic, very agile. And I have more than 100 developers, but most of the developers are busy with maintaining the system. So they don't develop; they just support the whole kind of system. What is the model-driven development means? It means that there is a model that is a master. They use syncretional roles to model the stuff. And if you look on the development cycle, it was different stages like revision, business concept, implementation. There's a small slot, about 2 weeks in half a year, to change the model. And if you would like to change attributes or change it a little bit, you should fit to this slot. If you're unlucky and you miss it, you should wait at least half a year to implement your changes. And interesting was that the people are smart and they found workaround. There's this kind of workaround on that limitation. The system has quite complex data schema with thousands of tables and ton of attributes, and not of all attributes are used, actively used. And they start to just to change the meaning of the attributes. So it takes some unused attribute, just rename it, change the meaning, and use it as a with a new values, with a new kind of attribute. It even maintains the Excel sheet with the unused old name and new meaning. And at the beginning of next model phase, they start with clean up this mess and rename it into and introduce new attributes. This kind of process, I cannot believe that it works, but it works for a long time. The people say, yeah, we are used to do it. Yeah. So such kind of cases are also possible, and such kind of processes are also possible. Lesson learned from this, that centralized responsibility hurts. It was really central person who was responsible this 2 weeks change the model, and they have a huge stack of requirements, change requests. And as soon as we build such kind of dependencies, it's really hard. And if you put a lot of barriers, a lot of limits, the people are smart, intelligent, always found workarounds how to avoid these barriers. And this perhaps good for people, but its question is it really good for the whole system? What do you think about that?
I like your conclusion that people smart and make workarounds. Well, can you? I didn't get regarding regarding. You said in the beginning that they used all names, but then you said they renamed attributes. So did they rename attribute or use old names?
No. They just use the old names, but with different meanings. So, for example, you have a country code.
Yeah.
Use it as a I don't know, sales group.
Yeah.
And you have a kind of translation table what the old attributes mean now.
Yeah, it sounds terrible. But did you find out reasons behind that? Like why did they start?
Yeah, because you have only 2 weeks to change it. You should wait half a year, and people cannot wait. They would like to develop.
Because of release.
Otherwise, they stack.
Yeah. Okay, I see.
And was it cleaning process, right?
It was cleaning process at the beginning of the modeling phase. Yeah, they clean up the table is empty then, and then they grow again. Yeah, so it was kind of process. Yeah.
So it means in general, this workaround was like supportable, maintainable.
Hard, I would say.
Okay.
But why it was a process like this? I mean, was it from the very beginning decided to have this process? Or
some historic reason, some organizational reason, because they would like to have enterprise architecture but have a full control on the model. They would like to control that all teams are doing. And you should, to change something, to change attributes, you should have a change request to them.
Well, I think like sometimes this approach it can be used. I mean, you just need to name this like I don't know, custom attribute 1, custom attribute 2. I saw that several times. Like when you want to extend, I don't know.
Is it exactly the case?
Yeah.
Because the people are creative. If you limit, for example, you say you cannot introduce a new method, or you should have approval to introduce a new method. The people quickly develop method like do anything, do something, and put any functionality on that. But the question is, it really good design? If you need custom attribute 1, is it really say something for a domain expert? And do you understand what is the attribute mean? Is it domain language? Does it reflect the domain language? You can do it, but it's very suboptimal way, and I really don't recommend to go this way.
But what you say, it's in my understanding, it's fully process problem. I mean, and in my understanding, it's easy to fix it. Just change the process, isn't it? I mean,
yes, yeah. Changes was not so easy because it's not only technical issue; it's more organizational issue. So how the organization works, they try to control everything.
So they didn't want to.
No, even this rational rows was maintained in the Windows because it's not supported anymore, and they have virtual machine with Windows old Windows version just to keep it this rational rows running.
Yes.
Okay, I see the time. I suggest we will look into one more case, and perhaps we schedule another session for the rest of the cases, if you're okay with that.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So let's look in the next case. Of ungrained. Yeah, it's exactly the question about the projection of the model. Context is it is a really large-scale food retailer, B2B, and the company grows very, very quickly, and it was 40 developers in the beginning and more than 200 developers on the end. In this case, the people from scratch would like to do the things really good, and unfortunately, the architect was in the Microservice conference, and they decide to start with a small, tiny microservices. Even there was the idea that every developer is responsible for single microservices. And it works with 40 developers. It even works. Shows quite good result. But as far as the system grows and team grows, it happens that kind of thing. So some small pieces was, and responsibility for some small pieces was unclear. So they belong to team 1, team 2, and team 3. And as soon as this happens, it's really hard the team, because you should decide who will change it if necessary, in which order. You should plan it. You should synchronize between the team, and the large organization is really, really hard. So this the problem. So the typical case to have the kind of order service. So it looks good from first point of view, but this order service has a lot of dependencies. So the checkout depends on that, support, fulfillment, billing, and you have that kind of aspects of every of that inside the order services. It's anti-pattern named the entity-based microservice design. So basically, it's an entity, is not a service, but the people interpret as a service and implement it as a service. And as soon as you end up with such kind of dependency, it becomes really difficult to work, because changing the order, it's very, very hard to control. Who will change it? You will change it first, or me? Which requirements, which team should be responsible for that? If it doesn't work, who will fix it? Yeah, so such kind of questions appears. And the question, what do you think? Why the people split the system into tiny, distributed, hard to manage fragments? Do you have any ideas?
Scalability.
Yeah, because of Netflix. I think I'm a big fan of Netflix. I like the architecture ideas and the company. It's a great company, but I think they make a bit negative influence on the architecture, because the people look to the architecture and say, yes, this is exactly the way how the systems should look like. They have a small, tiny pieces that communicate with each other. But this architecture is good. I think it's good, or perhaps it's good for Netflix, that produce media content for millions of people distributed across the world. But is it the architecture that's good for Netflix also good for your system? It's a question. So normally not. So everybody wants to be Netflix, but not everybody is. Solution for the problem was to instead implementing and making it as a service with a lot of dependencies. We just put as an entity into every bounded context. So the checkout has own projection of order with attributes as important for checkout. Support has order with attributes as important for support fulfillment and so on. And they are relatively independent. So what was the lesson learned? So the small is not always beautiful. So the splitting again is a bit the same idea of the case 3. So the splitting microservices is not always a good idea. And refactoring inside the team boundaries, if you have your team owns the code, refactoring and changes is more easy if you have some dependencies between the teams. Yeah. So any questions? So Pavel, is it answer on your questions you asked?
Yes,
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, my question, I wanted to ask like how you synchronize these orders between like different, but if you just try to make them independent and you have process and
yeah, sometimes you need, of course, some kind of synchronization. So some aspects of order could be relevant across this boundary context. But in this case, you either do it for the API or asynchronous. So if you just publish the business event and say something changes, something happens in the system, and all other systems who are interested in this information subscribe on this event and make modification in own entities. Yeah, it's of course it's possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I still have 4 other cases, but perhaps a little bit too much for today. Thanks for a lot of discussions and a lot of questions. What quite interesting. And I think we will schedule a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you, Andrei. Sounds like a good idea. See you in the second part.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.